1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast sound check. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. It's the Monday show. It's the Bournemouth reaction show. We are slightly later than usual, but we are live and we are here nonetheless. So I am your host, Ian Croll, and joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, we have the dynamic duo of Chris Beesley and Joe Thomas. Joe, how are things? All good?
Yeah, not bad. We weren't that dynamic on the way back from Bournemouth. 30 mile in a 70 for most of that, wasn't it? In all that snow, Chris. That's a fair old drive, wasn't it?
Yeah, like we said, our thoughts go out to all those Evertonians who also had to make that journey back afterwards. I think as soon as we got past Winchester, didn't we, it was just snow everywhere and pretty dicey conditions. But yeah, we're still here and at least we're able to talk about it.
Or you were just saying off air that you were forced to go down to 30 mile an hour in a 70 and there was a couple of skids along the way?
Yeah, it's a good job, but it's a safe hand on the wheel. No, but all joking apart, it wasn't nice at all for people having to make that trip back, and obviously with nothing to show for it either after yet another defeat at the Vitality Stadium for Everton.
Absolutely. So, been able to navigate the snow, Joe, before you come in today. Any snowmen built over the weekend?
Yeah, I got one boxed off yesterday morning.
Yeah.
That's it. Managed to about 3:30 by the time I got home from Bournemouth. So
Late one.
Yeah, late one. But I was up early, making sure I got my snowman out there. That's it. Everton scarf and all that.
Chris, any snowman for you?
No, I refused to go outside on Sunday after all that. I'd seen enough snow.
Just refused.
Yeah.
Point blank. Well, I went outside with the kids, and the kids lasted 5 minutes, and I was forced to just build a snowman by myself, which
Wow.
off air, I'm not showing it to anyone on here, but off air, it's an absolute shocking attempt at a snowman.
I thought it looked good.
It looked like I think I've described it as like some sort of demon penguin. So, yeah, that's...
It looked knackered. It looked how I think a lot of us
been
feel.
watching Everton all season, that's why.
Yeah, that's why I think it looks how we feel. I think it was you, that's it, building whatever it is you're internalising at the minute.
That's it. Okay, well, today's agenda, it is the Bournemouth post-match reaction show. We'll obviously react to another damaging defeat for Everton at the Vitality Stadium, what this means for Everton in the battle for survival, and what does it mean for the future of Sean Dyche. As always, give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. As always, we are live, so get your comments in, get your questions in on the stream. And interaction is always appreciated. Any feedback that you've got, any opinions, any questions, we will take them on board, and I will do my best to pick the best ones out and read them out. I guess, Joe, I'll start with you first, but I guess, a lot of speculation over the future of Sean Dyche yesterday, intensified this morning, I guess, with some of the reports that we've seen. But we'll start with Bournemouth itself. In isolation, you and Chris both went down there. What was, what's your initial reaction to I guess what was just an abject display?
Yeah, it was awful, wasn't it? I think this is the big frustration with the Forest and the Bournemouth results recently. I think that when you look at we can argue all we want about whether Everton should be going into these games without much hope, and there's merit in arguing that, and it shows the state in which the club is in and has been for some time. But in fairness to Everton, obviously it was a Forest side just before New Year's that in the Champions League places. And this is a Bournemouth side that have beaten far better sides than Everton at the vitality of the stadium and probably will do so again. But for all that, and I mentioned the Forest game because I think this is criticism and a belief that kind of extends across both those games. They were just both so disappointing. I think we could all accept if Everton went toe-to-toe with those sides or showed a bit of ambition and just came out the wrong side of a result in a game where you could say, well, they went for it, or they tried to be competitive, and in neither game they've landed a blow on either side. This was a match that was tight in scoreline only. Everton lost 1-0 and it was a late goal, okay, but this was a match that was closer to being 4-0 to Bournemouth than it was 1 each. And that really is quite damning, I think. And I think the big concern is that, like I've said at the outset of this, okay, Forest and Bournemouth are good sides in much better form than Everton, but you can't just write those games off because those sides having better seasons. The reality is most of the Premier League is like that, and the more that you fail against sides like this in the middle of the table, or those mid-ranking sides, the greater the pressure comes on those handful of crunch games that will dot the rest of the season, and Everton shouldn't really be in that position, or they should at least be trying everything they can to avoid that position. And that's not me saying that Dyche is trying to not win games or anything like that, but he looks a bit bereft of ideas at the minute, and Everton need to do more than just go into these places and trying to be tight and hoping something falls their way, because as we've seen repeatedly, I mean, this is 8 games in 10 without scoring, and it was 81 minutes before a shot on target at home to Forest. That game was already lost then. They didn't even have a shot on target at Bournemouth, and that's not good enough.
I mean, Chris, again, I'll just go with your initial reaction to it. Obviously, extremely disappointing there, but Joe's probably just touched on my next question there. Not even a shot on target is probably even more damning than the result itself.
Yeah, like you said, not even landing a blow on Bournemouth, and that was that's what I mentioned in me talking point this morning. Obviously, there's all the banter there that you expect. Saying you're going down with the Scummers, a reference to Southampton, and the bastardisation of the Seamus Coleman 60 grand song in terms of take your time, Jordan Pickford, all sort of that knockabout banter that you get during the game. But it was one thing that sort of struck me was when you've got to go through the speckies at Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium to get back to the press room at half time. And when Everton ears weren't even hearing, apart from me obviously picking up upon it, when it's Bournemouth fans just speaking amongst themselves, and they were agog, they were aghast that they said how bad Everton were. They couldn't believe it. So okay, they were lampooning Everton supporters, winding them up, saying, how do you put up with this every week? But they were saying it amongst themselves, and they generally couldn't believe that. And then it was a point that I touched upon in my piece. Yeah, we go down to Bournemouth, Joe and I know the Premier League circuit, and they're one of the friendliest clubs. There are a lot of lovely people down there, very helpful and stuff like that. But to have it right, but Bournemouth was celebrating. They've gone 8 games unbeaten in the Premier League. Everton have won more league titles than that. So for them, there's a very sort of, that doesn't mean anything in 2025, of course, Everton's past glories, but these upwardly mobile teams were just overtaking Everton, and for them, for a team with no sort of football heritage like that, for their supporters to say, can't believe that they put up with this every week amongst themselves. I mean, that was a new low for me in terms of Everton. For a small outfit like that, and their supporters really brought up on nothing compared to what Everton had in the past, for them to say that amongst themselves. I
mean, Joe, the preview show of this podcast is usually spent of us doing our predictions, picking our team selection, whether that's what you would think, whether that's trying to second guess what Sean Dyche would think. But I think we suggested, Chris didn't on Friday's podcast, it's kind of futile because you just know exactly what Sean Dyche is going to do, how he's going to set up, to the point where, even you said yourself in some of your tweets before the game that you would like to see maybe a different approach. You'd like to see maybe Young go left back, maybe take Mykolenko out of the game, out of the firing line, because we know his performances haven't been up to scratch. But what did you make of the starting lineup? Again, very much a Dyche starting lineup, a Dyche setup. It's just the same thing over and over again, expecting different things, but getting the exact same results.
It's tough because he doesn't have a huge amount of options, and even the changes that I would make, I couldn't guarantee they'd do a hell of a lot of difference. I would have, obviously I wasn't in the preview show, but for the piece I wrote, I would have moved Ashley Young to left back, started Nathan Patterson, and I probably would have kept the rest the same. I think it's more the approach and the ideology, the way in which they're trying to attack. I think the problem comes when you have, Lindstrom and Ndiaye, and you ask them to defend so much, you ask them to almost be wing backs on top of full backs rather than play as wingers, and then as a result of that, and as a result of the fact that Abdullah Doucouré is your man in the middle that's supporting Broja, you just end up with Broja just getting so isolated because you amount of defensive work they inevitably have to do against a side that presses hard, presses high, and has really effective wingers. I wasn't against the idea of starting Broja because, I think that we want to have a look at him. He's had a few interesting cameos. We know that he has we know that he had immense talent before his recent run of injuries. We don't know if the talent has survived those injuries. But look, although Dominic Calvert-Lewin was unfortunate against Wolves with the own goals, credited to Craig Dawson, he hasn't scored since September. Everton needs to try something a bit different. Retrospectively, I'll give a shout out to another podcast here. Finished my journeys back from Bournemouth listening to the Blue Frontier, which is an American Everton podcast, and they made a point which I'll admit I hadn't considered, but they were saying that in a game like that, Bournemouth lead the league for the amount of fouls they commit, and whilst they have quite a physical centre-back pairing, they also have one that you can kind of get at a little bit, and they were suggesting that Beto might have been a good player to start up front because for all that he lacks in terms of finesse, as someone that kind of pulls centre-backs all over the place and draws fouls, and we've seen that a lot from Beto. We saw it at the very end. Tyler Adams got booked for absolutely hacking down Beto in the last minute. We saw it against Liverpool when he came on at Anfield last season and he drew what should have been the second yellow from Ibrahim Konate. In those type of circumstances, his kind of bulldozer mentality can actually be quite effective, and it was against Bournemouth last season when he came on and scored the last minute equaliser as well. I must admit that was an idea that went beyond me, but again, it's something that it just represents maybe a change that Dyche seems to be unwilling to make to his formula, and his formula isn't working. It worked again in those 3 games against Chelsea, Man City and Arsenal. He deserves credit for that. They were good performances, they were good draws, but they didn't change the dial, and the problem is that it's all well and good playing for those points, but if you don't take advantage in the games around them, then you're still in a problem, and we're in a position where you can say that December, for the most part, was good. Massive win over Wolves, 3 really good unexpected points. But the failure, and this is where the disappointment with Forest and Bournemouth is so deep, is because of those results against those sides, and that's the way you play. If you don't take advantage of it in the likes of Bournemouth and Forest, you don't move the dial. You're still only a handful of points away from trouble. And like we've seen, it was a great point against Chelsea. That was really good, and they could have snatched it if Harrison had taken his chance. But since then, Palace have drawn with Chelsea and Ipswich have beaten them. That's part of the frustration, isn't it? It's you look at Ipswich right now, and we started a brand new year. We started 2025, and I imagine that, sadly, and as galling as it would have been, the best moment of the weekend for most Everton fans would have been hearing that Raul Jimenez had scored a second penalty in stoppage time for Fulham to save their blushes at home to Ipswich, and that in itself is quite damning. And unless they can find a way to change their attacking approach, and to say if it's not going to be personnel, at least it needs to be ideology, then that's what we're destined for the next few months, and that isn't something that I think anybody wants to risk. It's Everton asked Dyche at the end about reassurances and things like that, and when he said he couldn't give any reassurances, asked him if that meant he conceded that he was in a relegation battle, and a lot of word salad that comes out, but the inevitable conclusion from what he was saying was that he always thought they were in a relegation battle, and I think that those kind of that lack of ambition, I think, is probably holding Everton back at the minute.
Chris, I feel like Joe summed it up perfectly, really. The formula's not working. Mm-hmm. I think I suggested after the game, a lot of frustration as well from my part, but that it doesn't really matter now. We're at this point now where it doesn't matter who Sean Dyche picks as his forward, who Sean Dyche picks as his number 10, who he picks as his right wing back. It doesn't matter because it's the formula, as Joe said, it's not working. We're at a point now, or we've been at a point over the past couple of weeks where if Jack Harrison doesn't work, then Lindstrom will come in, and then Lindstrom will play for 2 games, and he won't work, so he'll go back to Jack Harrison. So it's not. I mean, Joe said options are limited, and I do agree to an extent. But the fact is, he has still got options. He's got 3 forwards that he can choose from. Now, I think it's all about approach. This ridiculously low block that he looks to play. The fact that Ndiaye, the fact that Lindstrom, whether it's Lindstrom as the right wing back, is always playing too deep and not further enough up the field. I think what I'm trying to get at is how does he change it? Can he change it?
Yeah, well, we saw that at the start of the season, and I've been speaking to Michael Ball today for his column, and he thinks that he's almost like doubled down after those, after ironically against Bournemouth, 3-2 home defeat, and then Villa. So it's like they tried to be a bit more expansive. They brought the expansive players in over the summer. But like you say, whether it's been Harrison or Lindstrom, neither of them even got a goal or an assist to the name, and it hasn't worked. He's almost become sort of a caricature of what it was, and that's the problem, because when the results were coming, you sort of could tolerate the style of football through gritted teeth because it was so attritional, because you had the results to back them up. But when you've got neither the good football or the results, and that's when there are problems, and that's what they've got at the moment. I don't know whether he goes out and experiments against Peterborough in the FA Cup. I mean, you've got to be careful there, because I mean, if that backfires and you get a bad result there, you really are in trouble. You don't want it turning toxic, but you just got to hope maybe some of those players could be a bit more expansive in a game like that against League One and opponents, and just try and get something to boost their morale, or something to, whether it's Harrison, Lindstrom, I think you mentioned in the car, Joe, or whatever. We'll have to wait to see where Broyer's up to now after he went on. Is it going to be going back to Calvert-Lewin up front, or is it better getting a chance against them? To be fair, he's done all right against lower division opposition. But something's got to change. Like we say, it's the repeat. It's almost become stale. Teams work them out. I don't know, because there are so few ways of them scoring. I usually from a set piece or a well worked move. I mean, have they been found out now? And they've got to become more expansive, not just more expansive, just have different options, different ways of going about things. And it seems at the moment he's really struggling to find the answers.
I mean, can he do that, Joe? I guess when 19 games in the season, halfway through, I know we've got a game in hand on a couple of people, but usually in Sean Dyche's reign, when it's got to maybe the point of no return, if you look at the 13-game winless run, a lot of people were calling for his head. We managed to get 5 wins out of 6. Obviously, a lot of people made a big thing about the match of the day graphic that they showed on Saturday. We're 19th for goals, 18th for shots, 19th for shot conversion, 19th for expected goals, and 19th for expected goals per shot. Is there any evidence from your point of view to suggest that Sean Dyche and this team right now can do what we maybe did last season and go on a 4 to 5 game win and run?
Not if he persists as it is. I think there's evidence. Sean Dyche's been there for 2 years now, and I think we preface most of our discussions with this. What he achieved in the first 2 seasons deserves a huge amount of credit for it. And to be fair, it was remarkable in both cases to keep Everton up that first year in the circumstances that he inherited, and then to lead the club to the points that they essentially got against those 2 points deductions last season was absolutely remarkable, particularly given all the off-field issues that he's had to deal with, and obviously a lot of those have seeped into this season as well. And I think, in fairness to Dyche, you would say that whenever things have looked like you say, they've got to a point of no return, he's normally managed to pull them back from the precipice. and then pick up the results that they've needed. You know, you think of in that first season, the hammering they got home to Newcastle, but then he follows that up with the win at the win at Brighton and the point at Leicester. And you think of this last season, obviously they had that huge winless streak, but they then follow that up with that incredible week in April and some good results after that as well. So he has got a track record at this club with this group of players of being able to turn it around, and that needs to be recognised because, you know, when, as I'm sure we'll come to in a little bit more detail, you discuss his future, there has to be an acceptance that there is a risk in both directions. You know, if you were to look for someone else, obviously they're not guaranteed to do anything better. But I think the reality is that he needs to change his approach, and I understand the frustration. I understand the difficulty that he had at the start of the season, where he tried to be a little bit more expansive with the additional attacking talent that he had, and all that happened was that whilst Everton created a few more chances, scored a few more goals, they conceded a lot more at the back, and that was problematic. It was a bad start to the season. You know, we can't hide away from that, but I think now's the time to kind of revisit that, because I don't really think he has since Jared Branthwaite came back, and I think Branthwaite being fully fit offers you the chance to get a lot further forward and gives you a much better degree of protection at the back. But also just because it's not working at the minute, Everton need to find wins. They're not finding wins, apart from a win against a very, very poor Wolves side, who still caused them a lot of problems at the back. Because I think because this is the other thing, you know, Everton before these last few games, boasted one of the most impressive defensive records in Europe, and when you look at the clean sheets and the run that they were on, and you know, it's only fair to give Dyche a degree of credit for that, but the main credit comes down to Jordan Pickford. You know, when you look at all those clean sheets, well, no clean sheet if he doesn't save the penalty against Newcastle, no clean sheet against a 10-man at Brentford, and if he doesn't save a 1-on-1 from Johan Wisson or 1-on-1 from Keane Lewis Potter, no clean sheet at West Ham unless he doesn't make that fantastic save against Danny Ings in the very last minute. No clean sheet against Arsenal if he doesn't put a man in the match display, and no clean sheet against Chelsea if he doesn't, you know, save that one from Nicholas Jackson. Like, you know, and this is the thing with, you know, I've written a piece on this where to try and encapsulate some of this right now. When you talk about the problems, Dyche does it a lot about going back to before he was here. And, you know, Everton have struggled to score for a long time, and he's fair, like that is right. He's also had 2 years to try and address it. But also some of the best things about some of the most useful parts of the squad he also inherited, including Jordan Pickford. And Pickford's the only difference between Everton, one, being in the Premier League as it is now, and the only difference between them being in the relegation zone and not being in the relegation zone right now. If they didn't have him to fall back on, then it really would have been a struggle. So, but the reality is, the approach, as turgid and as stale as it is, whilst Everton can be stubborn and resilient, they're not being stubborn or resilient enough. Opposition sides are still creating chances, and they are still getting wins against Everton, as Bournemouth and Forest have done. So now you're at the point where is the risk in changing things for a couple of games? You know, when I wrote in my Forest report, you know, Dyche spoke a lot around the Forest game about Forest not being that different to Everton. They like to play direct football to a target man. But the difference was, and you could see this in the game, you could see this with the first goal in particular, every time the ball was launched to Chris Wood, he always had someone around him. There's always Alanga was someone around him, or Morgan Gibbs-White was around him, or Anderson was around him. So there was always someone to win that second ball if he won, or made a defender make a mess of the first ball. And as a result of that, it meant they could get up the pitch and support him. There's just nothing like that with Everton. You know, it's Calvert-Lewin, and there's no one around him for 15, 20 yards. That's part of the problem. You're asking him to just labour against two centre-backs for 90 minutes, and if you take away Jordan Pickford saves, as I just referenced, or if you take away, as has been last month, Dwight McNeil's set pieces, Everton just don't offer anything. Dwight McNeil's set pieces and Jordan Pickford saves are the only reason they've been competitive. You take both away, as happens at time to time, then they're nothing. He needs to work towards a solution, and that has to be a kind of a readdressing now of that attacking threat. And, you know, as I say, I don't see where the risk is in being a bit more open now, because, well, they're still losing games whilst trying to be tight. So
it's obviously a valid question to say, or a valid point to say, he needs to change his approach. I think we all agree with that. I think my question, I guess, on that is then, it would be, it's just too easy to go, well, if he changes his approach and he beats a bit more expansive, a bit more attacking, then things are going to change. That's obviously not going to be the case. Does he have the... Is he a good enough manager? Does he have the tactical nous? Does he have the foresight to be able to get Everton out of this situation? We again touched upon it. We know he's done it in the past. I feel like this is a different situation than what has, happened previously.
I don't know is the honest answer.
Sorry.
That's exciting because we have to acknowledge that the squad is limited. Yeah. It is a limited squad. This is the culmination of several years of transfer windows where more money's gone out than sort of come in and gone out and things like that. But it's got to be a squad that's better than what it's delivering. We have to hope that. I still think there are things that he hasn't tried or seems reluctant to try that seem like obvious solutions. I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to go to 3 centre backs for a little bit and just see just try that and maybe have Patterson and as a wing back because he struggled a little bit when he came on defensively, but you get the offence. Patterson had 2 relatively decent cameos off the bench in December going forward. Maybe try and use them like that. I really do think they're missing a massive opportunity with that Ilman and Dye. I just think that he should be in a central position. There were times again when we saw it in the first half against Bournemouth. Everton's biggest attacking threat, or Everton looked most dangerous. They had that most bit of surprise and guile and magic when he was picking up the ball in central locations. Even with his back to goal under pressure repeatedly, he can go both ways. He can wriggle out of trouble and he can start something. I think if you can get him in the middle of the pitch and people feeding him, or him feeding off the scraps of a striker that's winning the long balls, then I think it changes the dynamic. And I think you at least then potentially begin to put other teams on the back foot. And at the minute, other teams aren't even have to think about defending. That's why it's so comfortable for them. There's no anxiety in Bournemouth after going 1-0 up. Yeah. They didn't spend the last 15 minutes backs against the wall. There's no nerves in the crowd. Even with Everton chasing the game. I mean,
on the formation, and I know it's easy for us to sit here and go, well, if he did this, he did that, whatever. Me and Gav have advocated for 3 at the back, 5 at the back formation change at some point, and I do think we've got the players who could accommodate that approach. Probably for another conversation there, but Chris, I guess the concern's not just the fact that Everton are just woeful, terrible, whatever word you want to describe the last couple of games. It's also the fact that the likes of Wolves, the likes of Ipswich, are starting to pick up points. In the past, when Everton have been through this poor run of form, the teams below have always just stayed below and they haven't managed to pick up the points that have needed. I think there's always been 3 worst teams off, hasn't it? For me now, it's not looking the case.
Yeah, it's just like remember Luton last year, weren't there? There'd be times they were very game and they'd have a go, but they were never quite able to catch up or anything like that.
But that was to the detriment at times.
Yeah, with the points deduction. But yeah, it's ironic really because I remember our Wolves have, like as Joe said, liberated almost by that 4-0 loss at Everton, because obviously that wasn't long after that Gary O'Neill went, and Vitor Pereira, a manager who's almost got like joke status at Everton because of that ridiculous car crash Sky Sports interview he did when he was touting himself for the manager's job. But then he's come back and he's revived Wolves. And then if you look back to when Joe and I were at Portman Road, it was almost like men against boys, I thought, that day. I think the way that Everton played that day, if you look back to October and you thought, well, Ipswich have spent a lot of money this summer, back-to-back promotions, they're having a go, but really when it came to the crunch, Everton showed their Premier League class and were able to keep them at arm's length. And as you say, they've gone from, if they hadn't conceded that last-minute equaliser at Fulham, they'd have gone above Everton. So I think for all those decent points against high-flying opposition in December, to be in that position, it really is a mess. And I don't know, in a way, it was always going to be difficult anyways. We know that run in December, but I think what has probably hurt Everton is that actually they've got those decent points in matches they were probably expected to lose, and then the fact that they haven't kicked on against Forest and against Bournemouth, because okay, Forest having an amazing season. They'd already got more wins and more points before the game at Goodison than they got in the whole of last season. But for Everton to be so bereft of attacking ideas against them and against Bournemouth, two sides they would have finished above. I think that there would have been above Bournemouth on goal difference last season if it wasn't for the deduction. So to see how they've both kicked on, and Everton have sort of gone backwards, because that's one of the things that to be fair, those of you who've seen the post-match interview on Saturday. Joe's like a dog with a bone, to be fair, and the best possible way. That's I mean that as a big compliment in the terms that I got quite angry when people were saying that Sean Dyche wasn't being questioned properly in press conferences, and we've explained the dynamic of when it's pre-match press conferences. That's not the written media that you see, but in the post-match, and that was Joe bossing it, to be fair, because he came in a few more questions and came in again. But yet, when some of Sean Dyche's answers again, he referenced that idea that expectations have gone up and the budget has gone down, and I understand. I've done a piece myself on the fact that Everton are the only Premier League team to make a trading profit since Felwell came into the club in 22-23. But we all thought they had a good summer. I think I made this point last week. It was a positive window, retained Branthwaite and Calvert-Lewin. Squad stronger than it was last season. That's the general consensus. I think nobody was expecting a push for Europe. What they were just expecting was an end to these sleepless nights. And he references, it won't go, just because it's the last year, the old lady, grand old lady anyway, that everything will be all right. No, but I think with a stronger team than they had last season, and all those obstacles that they had to overcome, the 2 points deductions, and Dyche has been rightly applauded for that, and the players, that they should be doing better this season, and they're actually doing worse with a stronger set of players.
I completely agree with you with regards to how strong the squad is, the team, certainly the first 11. There's a couple of listeners or watchers of our podcast who would disagree with that, but I guess it's open to opinion, interpretation. We obviously lost Onana, but was he able to fit into a Sean Dyche team? We know we had our best wins, our best results when Onana wasn't even in the team. Moving on then, Chris, I'll stick with you on this one because I know you wrote a piece on it. Jordan Pickford, I think you said he deserves better. Yeah. It's almost not fair on England's number one, Everton's number one. Obviously, Joe said there before it probably should have been 4-5-0 to Bournemouth rather than the 1-0. I mean, Pickford gets criticism for certain aspects of his game, and whether that's right or wrong, I think it's sometimes it is justified, but we'll praise him. I'm certainly going to praise him here. I think it's certainly not fair on him, is it? I don't think he should be in this position really for a keeper with his attributes and qualities.
I mean, I know we've got at least one regular viewer stroke listener who isn't.
Don't think he's on here.
Biggest of fans of England's number one, but let's have it right. Everton would be in the Championship if it wasn't for Jordan Pickford in the last few seasons. So fortunate. I mean, they've never had a regular England number one before. I know they've had goalkeepers who've been capped by England, but they've not had an England number one like Pickford, and all that goes with it, especially now in the modern age. And they're so fortunate that he's been such a loyal servant to Everton Football Club. I'm sure he could have easily had opportunities to go elsewhere, and he's now in his 8th season with the club. I thought it was actually a bit curious because one of the local reporters actually asked Dyche about Pickford's display on Saturday. It wasn't quite Roy Keane just doing his job, but he said that there was saves that Pickford, that Jordan as a goalkeeper of his calibre would expect to make. I don't think you can be get complacent when it comes to what Jordan Pickford is doing for Everton and has been doing for Everton for a number of years. It's incredible. So he's, I think personally, he's the best since Neville Southall at Everton. I know Nigel Martin was a very safe pair of hands, but unfortunately he came to Everton too late in his career, and obviously Tim Howard served the club with distinction for a decade, but for me, Jordan Pickford's best Everton have had since Nev, and that great save he made against Chelsea a couple of years back, that's about as good as anything I could have seen from Southall, and I can't pay him any bigger compliment than that.
And I think I mentioned to you last week, didn't I? I was hoping that you were going to be able to verify it before Thursday that if selected on Thursday against Peterborough, he'd make his 300th appearance for Everton.
Yeah, well, there you go. And I'd like to see that. I don't know. I know João Virginia did very well in the 2 cup games last season, but I'm old school. I don't like cup keepers. I mean, imagine like Everton leaving out Nev back in the day for a cup game. You couldn't have that. I mean, I go off on a tangent here in a whole different podcast, but Everton Football Club, only Liverpool and Manchester United have won trophies across more decades than Everton Football Club. So in an era when unfortunately Everton are not realistic title challengers, if they're not going for domestic cups, what's the raison d'etre? What's the reason for Everton Football Club, a club of that size, to exist if they're not trying to win cups? It's going to be 30 years in May since they've won a trophy. Probably a club as more as any in the country who's got that generation gap. You've got the old boys who've seen Everton be the best in the land on multiple occasions. You got people like me in the middle, sort of clinging on. You remember yourself as well, a bit younger than me. 95, you can remember that. But you've got people who are probably they could be playing Veterans League football. They could be over 35, but they can't remember Everton winning anything. So that's not good enough. I mean, I'm not saying that Everton are going to win the cup this year. I don't think they will, but at least give it your best go. And for me, that means there's no need to rest the goalkeeper either for a cup game.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, me and Tony Scott, who were doing a podcast on Wednesday, will probably discuss the team selection for Peterborough. But I think Joe Virginia did okay in the cups last year. Well, yeah. But obviously we got beat, didn't we, in the cup against Southampton in the League Cup, sorry. And Joe Virginia was in goal for the penalty shootout. I don't think he got close to one.
No. Jordan
Pickford's been spot on with penalties this season. So if it was to go to penalties against Peterborough, which we hope it doesn't, Jordan Pickford is the one to start really for me. Joe, a lot of time when a manager's reign comes to an end at a football club, they start saying some, silly or sometimes, ridiculous things. I do feel that Sean Dyche did that in one of his post-match interviews. I think it was with Everton, the Everton website or Everton TV. They're not taking it out of context because there was a full interview there, but he did say something along the lines of, we're on a good run. If we'd add wins to it, it'd obviously be a lot better. I just think, the point that I've just made there, when your reign's coming to an end as manager, there's sometimes you've just got no answers. You don't know what else to say. You've got no other solution to the problem, and you just start saying ridiculous, silly things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's been any real change in that from Sean Dyche, because I think that you have to maybe try and look at the way in which he approaches these things, and I think that often his tactics in dealing with the press after games is to try and say as little as possible. By that I don't mean try and say as few words as possible, but to try and provide as little insight and
not give too much away.
Which I think is a bit of a mistaken tactic in a lot of ways, because while I'd have complete understanding for anybody that perhaps didn't like to or feel like they wanted to deal with the press, it's a massive part of his job, and ultimately we are the best conduit to the supporters. We're the people that, through his answers to our questions, he has a platform to speak to supporters and let them know what's going on about their club, and they deserve full respect, and they deserve to be treated better, I think. He for a long time he's been saying that wins and goals, both of them change perspectives, and well, he is right, but I mean it's just stating the obvious, isn't it? And for a long time going into December, you would say, well, if they'd have held on against Bournemouth and not thrown it away against Villa, and everyone have a completely different perspective of the season, and he was right, but they didn't. And for someone who seems so pragmatic and wants to only focus on the realities of the situation and the truth of it all, and the stats and the facts and everything like that, getting lost in the counterfactual of what might have happened if this had happened and that happened, is just a pointless exercise, really, because they didn't win. They didn't. This is it. And I think I kind of referenced this a little bit at the time, because I nearly jumped in earlier, because what I think Deitch is reaping now is seeds that he sowed in the autumn, and it felt, trying to talk to him during that period and give any kind of suggestion that Everton were on a bad run or a disappointing run at the time because of what was coming ahead. It felt like you're banging your head against a brick wall, because I think that in isolation you could look at the Southampton game and you could say, well, you know what, Everton with a better side had some big chance at the end and just got hit with a sucker punch. In isolation you could say, all right, it's just one of them things. Brentford, you know, you can say, well, that they're a decent side. It's hard to play against 10 men sometimes. They're well drilled. You know, point isn't the end of the world. In isolation, that's fair enough. But the problem is when you started to add those games together, what you had was Everton failing to build any kind of buffer between them and trouble going into December. Now, as it happened, they did okay in those games and they did better than expected. And again, they deserve credit for that. But, you know, by not building up those points, they've just removed any protection come this time of the season. The issues that we're seeing now, really, their roots do go all the way back. Because if Everton had just done the simple things, and I know they're not simple, but if Everton had shown more ambition and gone to Southampton and beaten them, they should have beaten them. They were woeful, Southampton. Yeah, that is still the worst game of the season for me, Southampton. You know, if they'd have had more guile against Brentford, you know, 60 minutes against 10 men, against a team that hadn't picked up a point on the road all season. I mean, all of a sudden, if you had two wins, that's 5 more points. Everton are in a different. You know, no one's worried about anything right now. That might be wrong. Like, there might still be, you know, challenges on the way, but it puts a completely different complexion on the season. And I think it's that failure to have that foresight of what's coming and to protect yourself against it. And that's the problem we're in right now, because, you know, you're asking us for answers early, and it's tough. Like, and Deitch is in a tough situation. It is a limited squad. It is a bit of a, you know, he is still in a mess of a situation. They can't improve it that much in the transfer window this month, but because of the failures from previous in the season, it means Everton have got to be more ambitious against better sides. And, you know, Villa and Spurs and Brighton to come, and they all have vulnerabilities, but one thing they all have in common is they have all absolutely torn Everton to shreds this season. So you're in a situation where, you know, if Deitch was to be listening to this, he'd be saying, be more expansive and attacking against those. That's foolish. Like, and there is a degree to which that would be true, because look what those sides can do and have done to Everton. But it's the pressure of the situation that he's partly created by not being more ambitious against Brentford with 10 men, against Southampton down on the south coast, against Forest at home, against Bournemouth away. Go there and try and find something, because, well, look at it. I mean, from those 4 games I just mentioned, Bournemouth, Forest, Southampton, Brentford, Everton have picked up 1 point. They may as well have lost those games 3-0 as lost them 1-0 or drawn them 0-0. You know, then that's the problem. You know, that's why, you know, if Everton continue as they are, then the problem is that you then just heap so much pressure on those handful of games where, in Deitch's world, Everton can do a job. You know, when Southampton come to town for what should be the last game of the season, when Leicester come to town in February, and when Ipswich come to town. And history would show in previous seasons that Deitch has done enough in those games. He's always got over the line. You think Burnley last season, how much pressure there was going into April. They hadn't won for 4 months in the league. I mean, it wasn't pretty. He actually said himself he designed it ugly, but they did get over the line, didn't they? And then Brentford at home and things like that. But this season, it's a different story, because in those games, they actually haven't gone and got those big wins. They did at Ipswich, and they did it at Wolves, but they didn't at Southampton. You know, last half an hour against Leicester could have gone either way.
I think, sorry to interrupt, I think that a point that I've made previously on a podcast is that we'd always, at least not been defeated by the teams around us or below us. The only teams that I think we had, if memory serves me right, I think Bournemouth have beaten us, Wolves and Luton had beaten us prior to this season, whereas now, obviously, we've lost against Southampton. There's a couple of other games that we've lost to as well. It's those points where we would usually pick up, we just haven't.
And that's the difficulty of the situation right now, because I'm not saying being manager of Everton is easy. I'm not saying being the manager of this squad is easy in this season. And, you know, one thing I did agree with Deitch, one of the few things I agreed with Deitch in the post-match after the game, the other day was where he said, nothing has changed at Everton apart from the name over the door, and he they have new ownership and a new stability at the top, but really it's the summer when everything will change. It's still the same squad dealing with the same PSR issues during the same season. So, like, I do have some sympathy with him on that respect. But the big frustration with so much of where Everton are right now is the desperateness of where we are and how people are feeling as a fan base feels so unnecessary. Part of it feels like it's because of the lack of ambition and, the lack of foresight as to what was to come. And it wouldn't have taken very much in a handful of games to completely change that and make this all completely redundant. Instead, we're in a situation where things may well get worse before they get better. I think Everton, if they were to I think Everton under Dyche stay up this season. I still do at this stage. But it ain't going to be easy. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be probably tougher than certainly tougher than it needed to be. Now it might be tough for anybody that comes in, and almost you had this ridiculous situation where Everton have done so badly that it actually protects Dyche, because you think, well, if he's not here, someone who's saved him twice already, well, you could get someone else and it could be even worse. And that's one of the problems that the Freegans will have as they try and work out what to do right now. But again, Everton are in a difficult situation. So much of it feels self-inflicted, and that's frustrating.
I guess just to clarify, you think Everton will stay up even with Sean Dyche still as manager?
Pass, man.
No.
Just to clarify.
No.
Yeah, I think
No, let me just finish there. What I mean is, but you did say before he's got to change his approach. He can't so if we carry on doing now,
something's got to change. Either Dyche has got to change, or Everton have to change him. It's one of the two. It can't be more of the same. Yeah. Dyche has to accept that some of what is going on at the minute isn't working and try something different, or if he doesn't and he carries on with the same, well, that's just definition of insanity, isn't it? So, that's the problem. Because the games coming up are tough old games, aren't they? But they're tough games, but against teams which, in Villa this season, in Spurs this season in particular, we've seen average sides take points off them, or at least scare them. There are vulnerabilities there that can be exploited, especially at home. But in order to do so, you have to have the ambition to try and exploit them. Everton haven't shown that against Bournemouth and Forest.
I mean, I guess under Tottenham we were too open, too expansive. But it's the point, isn't it? Like we said before, Chris, it's not just a case of being more attacking, being more expansive, like not doing a low block. It's so much more than just that, because there's no easy answer to it. I guess with obviously another defeat, speculation's going to intensify, isn't it, over his future? And it's intensified, I guess, even more this morning. So we'll touch on it now. I know Sky Sports News and Alan Myers have tweeted an article. I don't know if this has been written or comes directly from Alan Myers, because I know his byline is not on the story, but he's tweeted it and it's come from Sky Sports News. So I'll just read a segment out of it, I guess. So Sky Sports News understands the Everton owners are reviewing the work of head coach Sean Dyche and weighing up what steps to take following the club's loss at Bournemouth. Is that just like a standard thing, do you think, like under the Freakins now, that this, with any loss, with any win, everything's just going to be reviewed on a weekly, bi-weekally basis?
Well, I think Joe's got a bit of insight on this. He might share afterwards in terms of that. But in terms of the semantics, but of course, going to be reviewed, because I think the difference was, as we talked about, all those times where you sort of come back from the brink in the past. The fact that last season, because they'd had such a fruitful autumn and they had those points in the bag, it meant that they were able to endure that awful club record Premier League winless run and still be okay, because they had the points on the board relatively early on. Let's look at the current situation now. So they played half the season. So I was going to say they played every Premier League club. They haven't played Liverpool, of course, because they've played Bournemouth twice, but they've played everyone else at least once. Now halfway point of the season, and they've only got 17 points. Now Sean Dyche makes a big thing of the only league table that counts. It's the final one, and it's a body of work over those 38 games. But if you're the Freakins looking at that situation, at the trajectory, and I see 70, less than a point a game. It's less than half the amount of points they finished at of Dyche's first season when he came in charge after 20 games when Lampard was sacked. And they avoided the first relegation in 72 years by one goal, by one Abdoulaye Doucouré second half goal against Bournemouth. It doesn't look good. Now, of course, his situation's going to be reviewed, and that's what's kind of changed in my mind in many respects. In the fact, when he was getting the stick last season, what I said, you've got to stick with Sean Dyche at the time, and I think was totally vindicated in that respect. But this season, I've not said that because we've just based it on the results, and as things stand, the results have not been good enough, and they're nowhere near good enough. It's far closer than it should have been. I totally don't understand all what the gripes about expectations going up and budget going down when, as I've already said on today, the squad is stronger, but it's actually performing poorer. So I think they have to assess it, whether that's informal, something that's happening all the time, or something more sort of pertinent, and given the like I said, the results at the weekend and recent results. But that halfway point of the season now, it would be an absolute travesty and an absolute disaster for Everton to be moving into that new stadium, not as a Premier League club. And after all the near misses and all the heartache that they've had and they've got through in recent years, including that incredible showing under Dyche last season, given the unprecedented pressures of those 2 points deductions, it's just not good enough right now.
Chris says you might have had some sort of an update.
No, just in terms of what Sky was saying, and
yeah, I mean, it's been reported that they're reviewing Dyche's position at the minute. I mean, I think that's just an ongoing process, and I don't think that's ever going to change. Yeah, they are, since they've come in, they were very clear in their backing, their initial backing for Dyche. That is something that they have been clear about. And there is no doubt that what they want more than anything else is stability. Their dream scenario is Everton just having a drama-free second half of the season that gives them the time and the space to put in place the pieces of the jigsaw they want. The new CEO, the new or make a decision on Kevin Farwell either way. So I'd give him a new contract or hire someone different. And the same with the manager. What they don't want is to be starting the new year with a fan base that's understandably got its head in its hands because it's staring down the barrel of another season where things could be far tighter than we want them to be, and results and putting Everton on the trajectory where at the very least you'd say they're in for another tight relegation fight. So that's the problem they've got. So there will always be speculation and them having discussions around Dyche and Kevin Farrell and their future. That's just an inevitable part of where we are in the situation where they inherit Everton. Obviously, with both those people out of contract in the summer, it's understandable they're going to have discussions after something like Bournemouth at the weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. I think what is clear is, and we can get lost in the semantics of it all, whatever it has and hasn't happened. What is clear is they're heading into territory which they didn't want, and then they're heading into territory where Dyche's future at least comes up for discussion. At least has to be, kind of war games. What do they do if Everton don't pick up another win this month? What do they do if the next game they get battered? What do they do if Postecoglou goes, Postecoglou or Lopetegui go at Spurs and West Ham, and all of a sudden those two clubs who, are in better places than Everton right now in terms of their squads and in terms of their recent ambitions, what if they start looking for a manager and start dipping into the same territory as to where the Freakins want to go to for their manager that they would want to put in place in the summer? Those are the difficulties. Like, they would only want to get rid of Dyche if it started to look like he couldn't do the admittedly low minimum expectation of keeping Everton in the Premier League. I think the problem is at the minute, the way things are going, that's still something that you'd have to question at the minute. Now, there are lots of different reasons why you could go in both directions, and I kind of said earlier on that the problem that they've got is who do you get that isn't another firefighter, and if you don't get if you get a firefighter who is there that's better than Deitch, bearing in mind that he's twice done this job successfully and already knows the club. So that's the problem they've got. Moyes came out with his interview after he was given the New Year's honour and heavily suggested that he wouldn't fancy a relegation fight. And now obviously we know that Everton's is probably a different prospect to him than any other club. Could they pull on his heartstrings a little bit for a temporary contract? Maybe, but the options are pretty limited out there. And the problem they've got is they either go for a caretaker or they take a gamble and go on the project manager that they want to come in the summer when Everton have new financial room to manoeuvre. They have the new stadium, new apparatus above them. Problem is, if you do something like that and you go for someone like a Graham Potter, then it's a very different scenario, them leading the rebuild of a new club that's on an upward trajectory in the summer compared to coming in the heat of a relegation battle right now. And the problem is that through no fault of their own, they could very easily end up in a situation where they lose the first 3 or 4 games and the project is over before it's already begun because you're thinking, this is going even worse, we need to get somebody else in. So it's just a mess of a situation where there's no obvious answer in any direction. And that's the problem Everton are in right now. And again, I think that for all that Deitch deserves credit for what he's done at Everton so far and for all the limitations he's had to work with, he also has to take a degree of responsibility for Everton being in this situation right now.
Okay, well, we
that
are.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. Look, I'm kind of personally, I'm kind of.
I'll ask you two this, right? So look, from PSR perspective, so Everton's accounts are being assessed right now. Anybody that's in danger of a breach or anyone who's believed to have breached in the most recent full completed financial year, which is 23-24, we'll find out probably next week. Now, Everton think that the business they did at the start of the summer, so sale of Dobbin, sale of Godfrey, got them over the line. They should be fine. They think they're going to comply with the rules for the first time in 3 seasons. Okay, that doesn't mean they've got a lot of money to spend this January. They do not fear that they're in a breach, at risk of a breach for 24-25, the year we're currently in, but they clearly think that they're close enough to the limits to not be able to go big in the transfer market. May well be that the finances dictate that you can have one of 2 things here. You either change manager because the compensation will add on to that PSR tally and potentially any money you need to buy out a new manager of a contract if they're currently in work, or you buy a player. What if you had that pot of money and you could do one of 2 things right now? How do you spend it?
Well,
someone just asked that question.
No. So that was kind of my next question, and I know people are going to be like typing on the stream and screaming down. My next question was basically, is it as black and white as should the freaking stick or twist with Sean Dyche? But I was going to emphasise on that point by saying, well, one, we could potentially buy players in January. Do the freakins trust Sean Dyche to spend that money? Farewell as well. I know we've got 1 or 2 players who could potentially come back from injury. I know McNeil's been out and potentially come back. I know James Garner, I'm not too sure how far away he is from returning to fitness, but if he was to come back sooner rather than later, I think he would have a positive impact on the team. Tim Idabouman as well, I'm not too sure how far away he is, but we know for all his naivety in the first couple of games, we know he's got certain attributes that would help that midfield. So that was my next question. Is it as black and white as should we just sack Sean Dyche, yes or no? And I know everyone on the stream is going to be going, yes, absolutely. And right now, I'm finding it hard to disagree with anyone who is saying that right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's black and white in the sense that there's only 2 things that the Freakins can do, and that is either stay with him or change him. What isn't black and white is the consequences of both. There's risk in both directions as we've gone in.
I'm terrified either way. I'll be honest.
That's what I mean, and I think what isn't black and white right now is the best way forward. Like the best, the most obvious way to Everton having a second half of the season where they don't have any trouble. I don't know which is the best.
I don't know where we pick up points though either.
What a position to be in, though. Yeah. Waiting to see whether you can afford to sack the manager or sign any.
Well, I mean, that was a hypothetical question from me, but I don't think it's that far from from reality. You know, and that's probably your question. Well, you know, do you back the squad or do you back the manager? Because there are clear issues with both, aren't there?
I think it comes down to who can you get in, which is obviously you've just touched upon anyway.
Probably both from a player perspective and a manager perspective.
Yeah, I think in the olden days, whether you want to call what era you want to define as the olden days, usually you would just sack a manager and then you would start the process of trying to find a new manager. Those days are gone. Now, you know, you almost need that new manager in. You need to be talking to that new manager before you sack the existing manager. Unfortunately, that is probably disrespectful, not to just to Sean Dyche. It's disrespectful to any manager who's been through that, but it's just the way of the world. I mean, do you remember when Unsworth, I can't remember who got sacked now, what manager it was. It was a Koeman.
Went, and then it was Unsworth.
But we took a while to appoint a manager, didn't we? I think it was bordering on 3 weeks to a month. Like, that was obviously a ridiculous situation in itself. We can't do that. Yeah. You know, if you're gonna sack him today, and you think, well, as an example, put Leighton Baines in there, then that's fine, I guess, for Portsmouth. Sorry, Portsmouth, for Peterborough. But then you've got 2 huge games coming up in Villa and Tottenham, and then obviously the third is Brighton as well. So I don't know the answer. I just know that things aren't where we obviously need them to be. Things, evidence-wise, you just look at that graphic that Match of the Day posted. We're in the bottom 3, 19th, 20th for every single thing that you need to score goals and to pick up points. Where are we? We're on the hour, so we'll finish off. Any final thoughts, I guess, before we do?
What people say, is there any questions on there?
Yeah, go on, I've got some actually. So, go on, I have got.
Like...
So, Terry Dactyle says, Dyche being exposed hasn't just happened. He's been shown to be limited for a while. Recently, he's been saying really odd things and refuses to change his one tactic, which isn't winning games. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
I mean, they're not winning games, are they? I think in terms of his limitations and whether I've spoken about this previously, we have to be honest with ourselves about what a good job is for Sean Dyche and what is enough for this season. And as uninspirational as it might be, enough is survival, and he's delivered that twice, hasn't he? But at the minute, right now, it's difficult, isn't it?
Andy Whitty says, is this what the panel constantly refer to as, quote, stability in defending, keeping Dyche in post? 3 wins all season, 1 point off relegation. Can the panel define what they mean by stability?
Yeah, that's kind of where we're going with the last answer. And if we were to look at this right now and say we're worried about where Everton are, that'd be quite understandable. I reckon Sean Dyche would look at that and go, well, they're not in the relegation zone at the moment, therefore he's doing enough. And the difficulty is weighing up the in-betweens there. Do Everton get those draws against Arsenal, Man City and Chelsea without Sean Dyche? I don't think they do. For all that Sean Dyche was, for all that Jordan Pickford was important in those games, I don't think this Everton squad gets those 3 points from those 3 games without having Sean Dyche there. So the question is probably, do they get more from Bournemouth and Forest with someone else with a bit more, ambition? And they couldn't have got any less, because there wasn't even any fight in those performances, was there? It's not even like they made it that difficult for those teams.
David B says, time is running out with Dyche around. Imagine we letting managers into relegation. We'd regard it as damn stupid. I mean, that's an interesting point, Chris. I mean, Joe's just said there, the club / the Freakins might think if we're staying out of the relegation zone for the next, say, month or 2, and we stick with them, can you imagine getting to the point of that point, but then dropping in the last 2 or 3 games? Wow. Would you think at that point then the club? And it's impossible question to answer, but they'd make a decision. That's
what happened to him in his last job, didn't he? Burnley went on Good Friday. So yeah, that's the problem. We shouldn't be talking about this. It's not good enough. It's not been good enough. Like you say, one of the viewers there, three wins in half a Premier League season. That's not good enough. 17 points from half a Premier League season with a team who would have 48 without the deductions last season. Yeah, it's not good enough. Gone backwards with a stronger squad. Yeah, should be celebrating Goodison Park's final game against Southampton when the free king group sacked at Roma comes in on the last day of the season. Don't want anything riding on that game. But yeah, I don't know. I've got a smile on my face. That's a sort of a gallows humour. Really, you can't be going to that. But, yeah.
I think the big what's changed more than anything in the past few weeks, and I think this will probably have the biggest impact on any decision, and it's probably the big background to a decision right now is less what Everton are doing and more the sides around them. I think that Southampton look like they're gone. Leicester have made the change but don't look any better. But the big problem that Dyche has had in recent weeks isn't really what Everton are doing, because the win against Wolves and the 3 good draws are great, and then if you're being fair, you can say, well, second in the table, Forest, all right, they lost, and then went down to Bournemouth, and Bournemouth have beaten everyone at Bournemouth this season. So actually, is the form that bad? But it's bad in context. It's bad when you look at the underlying performances, like we just said, but it's also bad in the context of, well, as I think we all feared would probably happen eventually, Crystal Palace have started to pick up results. They're 4 points clear of Everton now.
They've drifted away, haven't they?
Wolves were hammered by Everton a month ago, and in the last 3 games, the first 3 games under Vitor Pereira, have picked up 7 points. They could go above Everton if they beat Forest tonight, but they certainly look like a club that, again, probably got more momentum moving upwards. Question is then Ipswich, and the difference between now and, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago is Ipswich all of a sudden have galvanised, haven't they? Now, that might be a temporary thing, it might be a short-lived thing, it might be like, say, Luton did last season, where they'd had these little flurries every now and then, but actually were still a very limited side, and Everton eventually, just by going steady, just pulled clear of them. But
they just got solid reinforcements in Ben Godfrey as well.
But at the minute, that's the danger, isn't it? And I almost think that any decision over Dyche will probably have as much to do with the results that Ipswich and potentially Leicester pick up as they will what Everton do in the next few games. So,
okay.
I don't know what Ipswich's run's like, and I think Leicester's is still difficult.
Ipswich have still got a tough run over the next couple of games.
Have they?
Yeah,
so
from what I remember.
Help,
without looking at it now, I remember towards the end of December, early January, theirs was tough. Now Liverpool's coming up as well for them.
But do we think that had they held on yesterday, well, the conversation...
Oh yeah, it would have been horrendous. So it's
right
horrendous
now,
anyway.
Sitting there thinking, well, if Wolves get a positive result tonight, they go above Everton in the bottom 3. So the question for the Free King group has to be, would their decision now be any different had Ipswich not conceded a last-minute penalty? And if it would have been different, then
it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
But if it was to be different, then they probably need to act, don't they?
A big part of it is also, as we've already alluded to, it's like who you can get, because the job for survival for the rest of this season, as we said, is totally different than the job for next season with a new set of players, and you just don't know behind the scenes who they might be talking to or getting sort of encouragement from or not, as the case may be, because as I've already said, it's not been good enough.
Well, we've done another mammoth one. We always seem to do these mammoth ones when there's a lot to get off our chest. We'll finish off with this interaction on the stream, which has tickled me.
Okay.
Roy Nixon has said, we're sleepwalking towards relegation under Dyche. And Emma EFC has said, sleepwalking, ? We're full on legging it there, Roy.
Have a better bounce between the viewers themselves.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. I mean, we'll finish off, but just to let you all know, I'll be back with Tony Scott on Wednesday. So I have the final word on Bournemouth, and we'll preview the FA Cup tie with Peterborough, which is Thursday night. We'll also have the usual Friday show, which we will react to the Cup game. Fingers crossed Everton go through to the 4th round. Lineup still to be confirmed. I know Chris is off. Are you going to be in?
Wednesday, sorry.
Friday. There's no weekend game, is there? So I don't know if there's going to be any press conference.
Well, there won't be a press conference.
Yeah.
Because so I'm not sure. I'll see. I'll see what the weather's like before I.
Snowmen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Me and Frosty in the back garden be reminiscing or something like that. So.
No worries.
Enjoyed that though. But I think, summarise my position. It's incredibly difficult to know what to do right now, but ain't good, is it? Like,
it's not. Well, at least there's no. I mean, get past Peterborough, and then there's no game at the weekend. There's no Everton to ruin your weekend.
well, providing they get past Peterborough,
Yeah, that's
which
what I mean.
hopefully they do. I mean, hopefully, it should provide an opportunity, hopefully, for everyone to kind of just take a step back. And I'm in the João Virginia camp I'm not with Chris Beesley on the FA Cup.
Or me then
at this stage, but I am in for you get Lindstrom on the pitch and you get Jack Harris on the pitch, and you just hope that even if one goes in off their backside, to use the cliche, like just something happens, just to get Beto on there. You just something happen, or Calvert-Lewin hasn't scored in a while. Just and hope that will be the trigger for some improvement.
Quick prediction then.
But I think Everton will win. I think Everton will win 2-0.
Chris?
Well, I'll go positive 3-0 then. Why not? After all that, we brought ourselves back from the brink.
No, fair enough. Well, I was just going to say, there's no weekend game for Everton, but we're not off, are we? Because we're going to be doing a recording of Goodison Park, my home, with a special guest. We won't reveal a guest.
No, we're going to say but we're hoping to get we've got one in the pipeline, haven't we? Hopefully that'll be with us soon.
Well, we told people who that was.
Well, I know about that one, yeah. So we're hopefully Ian Snowden be with you soon. But yeah,
I've been lazy over Christmas and I haven't been able to get Ian Snowden out, unfortunately. But we're aiming for next week. I won't give a day, but Ian Snowden's interview with Chris was really good, and we're aiming to get that out at some point next week.
Yeah, and then hopefully get the first one of 2025. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, that is all for today's Royal Blue podcast. Please remember to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, show us your support. It is greatly appreciated. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll try to look forward to Peterborough on Thursday night. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas and Chris Beesley, and this has been the Royal Blue podcast.